The man walking in the water wasn't the king of the sea. Actually, he was a lamprey. He went around to seduce women. Then he locked them up to give birth to his children. That day, the girl named Liberty just got out of school. Her mother drove the car to pick her up. Her mother seemed happier than usual. However, Liberty was sullen and unhappy. She wanted to go to Cambridge University, but tuition was a big problem for her. Liberty's mother asked Liberty to drive. Even without a driver's license, Liberty drove very well. Suddenly she noticed the watch on her mother's wrist. She asked, "Do you have a new boyfriend?" But her mother denied it. When getting home, her mother excitedly ran up to knock on the door. And kept calling, "Honey." Liberty was feeling very confused. "I'm standing right here, what are you calling?" But in the next second, she started to feel agitated. There was a muscular and handsome man walking slowly from under the lake. With this physique, he looked like a sea king. Her mother introduced her new boyfriend. He was John Smith. John also gave Liberty a debut gift. With the handsome appearance and thoughtful care, Liberty fell in love with him. Liberty wore a cool outfit. And she looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. After that, the three of them started eating breakfast. Her mother said she and John met while painting. They just met and fell in love with each other. John said he was an ecologist. The salinity of freshwater in geology was constantly increasing. His job was to promote the evolution of freshwater creatures. Hearing that, Liberty and her mother didn't really understand either. John suddenly touched Liberty's shoulder. At night, Liberty put her hand on her shoulder that John had touched. And began to imagine. She even sneaked into her mother's room. She heard the joyful laughter of her mother and John. But when seeing the door opening, she immediately ran to her room and pretended to be asleep. The next morning, Liberty wanted to join her mother in remembrance of her grandfather. But her mother was prejudiced against him. He only left this house and let Liberty inherit it. Hearing that, Liberty felt unhappy and went to the lake for a walk. And accidentally met John here. John said he wanted to meet her. He also told her that, because of his appearance, she and her mother began to quarrel with each other. He even said, "Maybe I should leave. In order not to disturb the peaceful life of the two of you." He was very good at understanding women's psychology. Hearing that, Liberty immediately felt awkward. She thought she shouldn't disturb her mother and boyfriend. Arriving home, Liberty told her mother. But her mother said John proposed to her. Liberty blessed them. Seeing that Liberty finally accepted, her mother was extremely happy. But she said she didn't tell John her real age. The fact that she was 10 years older than him. She wished Liberty could hide it for her. But when John came home from jogging, he took off his shirt and wrung out his sweat, and then drank his sweat. Seeing that, Liberty was amazed. After that, she held 2 cans of soft drink, and went down to the basement to see what John was doing. The room was extremely dark and emitted a red light. It turned out he was studying lampreys, a parasitic organism, and was known as the bloodsucker on the bottom of the ocean. Liberty looked at their trunk and felt extremely disgusted. However, John said this creature was very beautiful, and very relevant to his research topic. Because the house was extremely cramped, the two of them decided to go to the lake to collect samples for research. John just caught some eels. And suddenly he saw Liberty on her period. He quickly took the shirt to cover her. Liberty was so embarrassed. She felt that this man was very unusual. Then something even more terrifying happened. He licked the blood on his hand. Liberty felt he was like a monster. After returning home, she immediately took a shower to clean the blood on her body. But unexpectedly, she saw John sneak in. He was putting his face in the curtain and inhaling it. Liberty felt something strange. She called her best friend, but the phone signal was interfered. Fortunately, she was still able to connect to the internet. She begged her best friend to come to her house to confirm if the other stepfather was a pervert or not. At night, there was a red light shining into the room. She looked through the window and saw John walking out in the middle of the lake. The water gradually reached his head. She quickly ran to knock on her mother's door, but no one answered. So she ran to the lake to see if something happened to John. She turned towards the lake and called out loudly. Unexpectedly, John suddenly appeared behind her. His clothes didn't get wet either. Was she hallucinating? The next day, her mother vomited a lot and told Liberty to buy medicine for her. At the drugstore, she saw a man who looked exactly like John. He was hugging a beautiful girl's waist. At this point, she was feeling extremely worried. So she immediately ran home to find her mother. Her best friend also came. But when she asked her mother, she said John was always by her side and didn't go anywhere. So who was the man she met on the street? Her best friend said John was very polite, and he had absolutely no problem. Liberty told a strange story she saw to her best friend. Her best friend also felt that something was wrong, so she decided to advise Liberty's mother to leave John. But after going upstairs, she disappeared. Liberty suddenly got her period. Seeing that, John immediately covered her with his shirt. After that, Liberty felt that this man was very unusual. She ran home and advised her mother to leave him. But at this time, her mother was in love with John. Furthermore, she said she was pregnant. She blamed Liberty for being childish and not understanding. John hugged her mother and even winked to provoke Liberty. Seeing that, Liberty was extremely angry and ran to pull her mother away. But her mother was so infatuated with love that she even slapped Liberty. In her anger, she revealed her mother's real age. John knew that she was 10 years older than him, so he left angrily. Her mother wanted to hold him back, but she heard the angry roar from his throat. She was so scared. That night, Liberty heard a strange noise outside the house. She took out a flashlight and looked around, but she didn't see anything unusual. She didn't feel secure and quickly ran into the house, and didn't see anyone in the house. At this time, the red light appeared again. She decided to drive to the lake to see what was going on. Follow the lights of the car. She discovered something strangely shaped in the lake. Worried that something would happen to her mother, she immediately called her mother. Then she heard the phone ringing from the basement. She slowly walked down and suddenly saw a horrifying scene. Her mother was locked in a water tank. Her hands were also tied very tightly. She quickly untied her mother, but due to carelessness, she spilled the brine tank. At this moment, John's footsteps sounded. She quickly hid in a corner, and discovered after stepping on salt water, his legs were burned. He had to wear shoes to get in. He made her mother give birth to a monster. After that, he hugged it and put something blue in its mouth. This time, Liberty was sure he was a monster. When seeing the machine jamming the phone signal, she immediately took a stick and smashed it. She was so scared that she called the police. Suddenly John rushed in and strangled her. There were 2 terrifying tentacles sticking out of his mouth. In a panic, she smashed the salt container in his face. He fell down in great pain. Liberty rushed to hug her mother out of the water tank. The 2 of them tried to run away, but eventually, they were still caught by John. After waking up, Liberty found herself tied to a chair. And there were a lot of men coming down from the attic. They all looked exactly like John. They knocked on the wall. There were also a lot of harmed women behind the wall. Liberty panicked and called for help. John approached her and made her swallow something that emitted a blue light. When regaining consciousness, she found herself locked in a large water tank. There were also many girls who had become reproductive tools for monsters here. No matter how hard she tried to ask for help, there was no response. The movie comes here. Don't forget to like, share this video and follow our channel.